Hey, Pascal here, nice to see you again. And when you watch this video, you're probably looking for a travel camera. Maybe you want to get into travel videography, but you don't know which camera to get, so you should definitely watch this video because this is what we're talking about today. So you're probably asking yourself where I am right now. I'm at the Phnom Penh airport, just arrived in Cambodia right now. And this is actually the second video on my 30-day challenge. I will produce one video per day on this challenge for 30 days. So if you haven't seen yet, then you already missed one video. So watch it after that. It's about how to shoot great hyperlapses with the GoPro Hero 7. Could also be interesting for you. And yeah, I will spend 15 days in Cambodia filming a backpacking tour here, so you will learn a lot about filmmaking, but you will also see a lot about Cambodia, and that's a pretty interesting country here. I've already been here 2 years ago, so I can definitely recommend traveling here. But yeah, let's first watch what camera to get. So I just checked into the hotel and I'm on my way to a camera shop now to buy a new lens. But let's first talk about the specifications that a travel camera should have. And the most important thing is that you want to have a good camera stabilization, because let's be honest, in a lot of cases you just have to get a shot very quick, and to do that you don't want to carry a big gimbal or something like that all the time around, and that's why camera stabilization actually matters a lot. And so that's why the best thing actually to get is a camera with a stabilized sensor, because that's a lot better than electronic or digital image stabilization, because it keeps your quality perfectly, like you don't have any quality loss there, and that's definitely what you want to have. And yeah, so apart from that, also to get a bit smoother image, you also want to get 4K 60 or 1080 60, 1080 120, like a high frame rate, because when you shoot in a high frame rate you can slow it down later, and that means that the footage automatically looks a bit smoother. So let's say even if you have a stabilized sensor but you still have some bumps in it, or a little bit of shake in some of the clips, then when you slow it down, let's say you have 4K 60 and you slow it down to 50 or 40%, depends on what frame rate you choose, then you automatically see the small shakes or bumps a lot less, and that helps a lot. And of course, if you then also apply some image stabilization also in post, you have a buttery smooth image, and that makes your footage directly look a lot more cinematic. And the next thing I think is pretty obvious. You want to have a small camera because, well, you travel, so you don't want to carry so much with you. And that's why I would actually suggest for your main camera, really, if you don't want to get an action cam or a point and shoot, we'll come to that later, you should definitely get a mirrorless camera instead of a DSLR. So the difference is that a DSLR has a mirror inside that makes the camera a bit bigger. It's also a bit harder to use depending on the camera, of course. And a mirrorless is usually a bit smaller and it's easier to use, at least for video. But yeah, that depends a bit on the camera, but it's definitely smaller, and especially the Sony cameras, they are pretty small. Right now I'm using the Panasonic GH5. It's a bit bigger than the Sony A7, but the image stabilization is incredible. So yeah, definitely get a mirrorless, or make sure at least that the camera is small. And another important thing when we're talking about video and not photo is also the audio, obviously. You want to get great audio, especially if you want to vlog like I do right now. If you don't want to vlog, if you only want to get B-roll footage, like showing the places and having a voice over something, then the audio of your camera is probably not that important. But if you want to vlog, do something like I do right now, then you definitely need to make sure that the audio is great. And usually the audio of a camera usually sucks, so it's at least not that good. So the best thing is to really have an audio input, a microphone input in your camera, so that you can use an external microphone. Right now I'm using the Rode Video Mic Go. It's a great microphone, and there are also other microphones in the same price range. It's around $50-60, and I can also recommend is the Video Micro. That's usually good for beginners. And apart from that, it's also important that you can set your camera to manual modes. And what I mean with manual mode is that you can do all the exposure and the focusing and so on manually, because that way you get a lot better footage, it looks a lot better, and you also train yourself to get better shots, so you actually learn something. So those were the camera specifications that are really important for travel cameras especially. And yeah, we'll go to the shop now and get my new lens. It's a Sigma 18-35. I need to use a speed booster on the GH5 to use it, but this lens really is awesome. It gives a full frame look. That's why I want to have it. And yeah, let's go to the shop now, and then we're coming to the camera types that you can choose for travel. So I'm back at my apartment. Hope it wasn't too loud outside so that you could understand everything. And I'm filming with a new lens now that I got, the Sigma 18-25. I hope I'm in focus. It's really hard a bit to see on my small GH5 display if I'm in focus or not, but the lens itself, it looks nice. I had to adjust the speed booster a little bit, but now it looks great. And it's very sharp, shallow depth of field. I really love it. But now let's talk about actual cameras. And I would say there are like three categories, like three price segments, like low budget, medium budget, and high budget. What you can do when you get a travel camera for filmmaking, for travel filmmaking. And yeah, in the lower budget, I would say that's mostly for people that really just want to get started with vlogging or something like that and are not that much into cinematic content like I do, like we already talked about before. And in that case, really get either a GoPro Hero 7 or the Osmo Pocket, or what you can do alternatively is to get a Sony a6000. Best, I would say, to keep the cost a bit low, use, so get a second-hand one. But the thing with the Sony a6000 is that you don't have a stabilized sensor. You definitely need stabilized lenses, but apart from that, even with stabilized lenses, it will be extremely shaky. You will not really get handheld shot. So in the long term, you definitely want to get a gimbal with that camera, or you want to have a tripod or something like that. But let's be honest, tripod movements are so yesterday, they really don't look good anymore. So that's why I wouldn't really recommend to do that with a tripod. And in that case, really, if you really only have maybe $400, $500, $350 for the Osmo Pocket, I would seriously go for the action camera category and just get a GoPro Hero 7. I mean, at least you can get started, and this is good. But what you should also think of is, do you really need to start now? Because maybe you can save 2 or 3 months more, and then you can already get a much better camera, like we're talking in a minute. So I think that could also be an option. Let's say your next vacation that you want to film is still 3 months in the future. Then better save a bit more money and get a better camera. But yeah, I mean, the GoPro Hero 7 is awesome. Osmo Pocket is also a great one, but I don't like the autofocus right now. Hopefully it get fixed with the firmware. But it looks pretty good what's coming there. So DJI, I love this company. So let's come to the mid-range budget. And I would seriously say in that case, like, let's say somewhere between $700 to $1,000, I would definitely say get the Panasonic G85 right now. It's the beginning of 2019. And that simply because the G85 is a little brother or little sister of the GH5. And it also has a good stabilized sensor. It's not as good as the GH5, but it's great, and it works together with native Panasonic lenses. So you have a great stabilization there. It's probably maybe as good as Sony A7 or maybe a little bit better. I don't have a real comparison with that, but I think it should be at least around the same, if not better, because the sensor is smaller and it has more space to travel. So that's really a great camera, but depending on your budget, you probably want to get a second-hand G85. And what you can also do is to get the Sony a6000 together with a gimbal, because then you also have it stabilized. But again, I wouldn't do it personally, simply because Sony a6000, I mean, it's a good camera, but it's overheating a bit faster, and if you have it on the gimbal all the time, you're not that flexible with it and so on. I wouldn't really recommend it. It's an option, but I personally wouldn't do it. Another option would be like just the prices from the GH5 dropped a little bit, so maybe you can get a bargain, maybe you can get a GH5 somewhere for $1,000 or something like that. I'm not exactly sure if there would be a lens included. You definitely need to have luck for that. But apart from that, if you have a little bit more money, use GH5 plus 12 to 16mm Panasonic f3.5 lens. That was the lens that I used in the past 2 years, and it worked great, and it doesn't cost that much money. So that could also be a good mid-range option if you can really get a bargain from a GH5 there. Go for it. Same, of course, also counts for Sony cameras, maybe a Sony a6500. So I think these are the best mid-range options right now in the beginning of 2019. And I want to mention that here in the future, when you watch the video maybe in a year or two, the market has changed definitely. So just look for those product lines and look if there is maybe an upgraded camera, a new version or something, and yeah, look for that. It's probably also a good option then. And then of course we also have the high-end budget, and high-end budget I would say is around $1,500 to $2,000, and in that price range really get the Panasonic GH5. You probably recognize that I'm a big Panasonic fan, but that's for a reason, because the stabilization is so good. Actually in 2018 I did not use a gimbal at all. All the shots are straight out of my hand, of course a bit stabilized in post-production and so on, but there were no gimbal use, and this is just because the GH5's image stabilization really works that great, especially if you have a Panasonic lens, a native one on there, because it works together with the optical image stabilization of the lens, and this is fantastic. So that's why I definitely recommend the GH5. You also have 4K 60. If you want to shoot in 10-bit 4K 60, if you want to have ProRes or whatever in the future for like clients work or whatever, you can pack a Ninja V monitor on there and you can record straight to the monitor. That's a great option. So this camera is really still in 2019, even if it's already 3 years on the market. It's in my opinion still the best camera that you can get for travel filmmaking. Of course, if you really don't like the GH5 for whatever reason, there are other cameras out there. Right now the Sony a7S II, and I would say soon the Sony a7S III will arrive, but still in the future we don't really know when it will happen. Another option would be the Sony a6500. It also has a stabilized sensor. It's a good camera. A bit more overheating problems, but it could also be an option that you should look into. But both Sony cameras don't have 4K 60, so it will be less smooth. But let's say, for example, if you want to shoot in 1080 anyway, then you can probably also just shoot in 1080 60 or 1080 120, and you will also get great results. And as you can see, it's already it. Like it's not that complicated. There are not so many options out there for really good travel cameras. Of course, I know there are some YouTubers that shoot with Canon. I think Sam Calder, Peter McKinnon, a lot of people use Canon. And I must seriously say I've never been really into Canon. I don't know much about these cameras. There might be good options, so take a look if you want. But they don't have 4K 60, and the image stabilization is not as good as from Panasonic right now, and so sorry, but in my opinion I wouldn't get Canon, at least for myself. But yeah, if you want to have a look into that as well. And what I also want to say is that at the end, to get great shots and tell a great story, it's not just the camera that matters, it's at the end you and what you learn. And that's what we're doing in the next 2 days. At first, tomorrow we will set up your camera so that you know what settings to set how, and those settings are usually there on every camera. And on the next day I will show you how to actually use your camera, like exposing your shots and so on. That's all very important, that if you understand this basic, then at the end it doesn't really matter so much anymore which camera you have in your hands. I mean, of course you can see maybe the differences in stabilization and so on, but your shots will still look great because they are well exposed, the colors are good, you can do a lot of color grading with that, and then you get beautiful videos. So I hope you liked it, and definitely hit the subscribe button and the notifications button right now, because like mentioned earlier, I'm doing the 30-day challenge right now. So along the next 2 days you will learn a lot more, and we will also see a lot about Cambodia in the next few days. So see you in the next video.